How's it going? Welcome to a brand new edition of the Build series live here in New York City. I'm Kevin Kenny, and our guest today is taking some time out from her cross-country tour. Literally drove here from a gig in Boston last night to talk about this record right here, Castles. Joining us now live in studio, Lissie.
Hello, hi. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming by. That's a nice way to start the morning, right? A bunch of applause.
Yes, it's waking me up. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, that and the coffee, right?
Yeah, lots of coffee.
I mean, but for good reason. I mean, you just came here from Boston last night. You had a gig in Boston.
Yeah, I'm on tour. So, like, when you're on tour, if you are on a bus tour where you basically get on the bus after the show and you sleep on the bus, and then when you wake up, you're in the next city, and you wake up and try to find somewhere to brush your teeth and take a shower, and and then you start your day. Yeah, so we were in Boston last night, had a great show, and got up and came straight here and played Bowery Ballroom tonight.
That's awesome. Hashtag tour life, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I'm so excited to talk to you today about Castles because I feel that Castles is just as much a journey as it is a body of work. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I do you want me to expand on that?
No, you can. Yeah, I mean, or I can. I think that, you know, the old saying, right? Like, it's not about the journey, it's about the destination. So for you, is Castles more about the project that sort of the journey gave you, or is it about the journey that led to Castles?
I mean, I think the thing is with each album, it's really just almost like a documentation of a chapter of my life, you know? So Castles is really a continuation of what, you know, someday when I look back on like my full catalog, it's all just little chapters of a story. I'm a very true to life, literal, real time sort of writing about what I'm going through writer. So Castles is from start to finish, you know, not really a concept album, but it really is meant to be listened to as like a body of work in order because it's all kind of about one specific relationship, one specific time in my life. And, you know, the difference between it and say Catching a Tiger, which was about a relationship too, is that, you know, I'm 10 years older. So I have a different amount of self-awareness or sense of humor about sort of some of these patterns that I keep repeating. And so I'm starting to figure it out now. So hopefully in a couple more albums, like, I'll have figured it out.
The mystery will be solved, right?
Yeah, the mystery will have been solved, and I'll be trying to solve a new mystery.
Yeah, the never-ending cycle there. Yeah. Let's talk about the journey and start at square one, if you don't mind. So it kind of all starts with a couple of years ago, I understand. You just kind of got fed up with L.A.
Well, I mean, I left LA in 2009. So I was in Los Angeles for 5 years from 2004 to 2009. And then I moved to Ojai, which is like close enough to LA, but it feels like the country. You know, I'm more of a nature person. So I moved to Ojai. I lived there 7 years. And then in 2015 was independent and was starting to make a new album and just felt like kind of a little bit disillusioned and wasn't really sure what I was hoping to achieve. You know, I wasn't really having fun. I was stressed out and felt like a lot of pressure that this thing that was my music and my art and my creativity and my self-expression like was being, you know, when you try to commodify that, inevitably you're gonna sort of like taint it slightly. So I was just feeling kind of like, I don't really like this. I'm not having fun. And I've always wanted to buy a farm in Iowa. So I'm just gonna like move to Iowa and buy a farm. And I did. And but I also made a record and have been on tour. So I didn't really like quit, you know, the music industry. I just sort of changed my approach.
Yeah. You talked about always writing from such an authentic place and sort of documenting portions of your life and really writing autobiographical lyrics and music. Did you feel like that was being jeopardized when you became disillusioned? That you couldn't write from that place, you had to write it from a different place?
I just think, and without, you know, going into it too much, because I don't want to spoil like all the magic of, you know, of the music, but I think you really do when you're going into making a record. I mean, there is sort of like a cast of people who are telling you like, sorry, but you just don't, your songs aren't good enough. These songs aren't good. Like, they're not singles. Mm-hmm. And when you feel like you're telling a story that's real, that matters, and you need to get it out of yourself, and rightfully so, you know, obviously not every song's a hit. Not every song's Best Days, which is a total hit. No, but, you know, you have these songs that basically like 5 people will be like, I don't think that song's very good. It does kind of like make you feel bad. And so I think it was just figuring out how do I continue to write from a place where I'm not putting pressure on myself, where if I start the song and I'm like, this one sucks, I'm not going to finish it. You know, I had to kind of get back to where I was just wanting to create because it was for me again, you know. And then by doing that, it all sort of just started flowing again, and I could both perform and make records, but also kind of keep things sacred for myself.
Yeah. And also, it's important to note, good, like when they say it's not good for their goals, their very specific goals. Whether it
and
be
my goals too. I mean, not just that like people being mean to me, but you know, bearing in mind like, you know, there's a reason why certain songs get on the radio and certain ones don't. And it's not like you have to get on the radio, but if you do, more people will know you exist and come to your concerts, you know? So I think it's just trying to navigate, like trying to be successful, but also trying to live authentically and finding balance.
Yeah. So you want to move, you know, you want to change the pace. You don't just move anywhere, like as you just said before. You move, you get a farm in Iowa. How do you even go about finding a farm? Is there like an app for farms? Is it like an apartment?
I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. And I keep meaning to get on farmersonly.com because everyone tells me I should because I am single.
You kill it.
But I've yet to figure that out. It's like kind of just the long story short. So I grew up across the river from Iowa in Rock Island, Illinois, the Quad Cities, and I've just always really loved like the Iowa countryside. I've done all these road trips with my mom over the years to go see like the bridges of Madison County and go to John Wayne's childhood home, and went to Fairfield, Iowa to learn transcendental meditation, which is where, you know, the Maharishi University is in Iowa, which people wouldn't really think of that. So anyways, I always sort of loved like Iowa farmland and had this sort of romantic idea that someday I would have like a farm in Iowa. And in the beginning of 2015, when I looked at my life, I thought like, hey, like with what I'm spending a month, my rent in California, I could buy like a 50-acre farm in Iowa. And I've had a real estate agent in Iowa since 2008 because in a specific part in Northeastern, because I just really love that area. It's rolling and pastoral and beautiful. So I called him up and I was like, I'm ready to do this. Like, and I flew out and I looked at 5 different places and I found one that needed work, but that I thought was a good fit, and I bought it.
Because it sounds like you're trying to escape maybe the hustle and the bustle of California. But to me, like a farm sounds like such a huge responsibility. Like you must have things to tend to.
Well, it sounds like more responsibility than it is for me currently because, the other thing is my family lives near there. So that's sort of why, like, I can go see my family easily. Right. So I'm closer to family. I rent out my tillable land, and my neighbor checks on my garden and mows the lawn. And so it's really actually not that big of a responsibility for me currently. If I were ever to like take a break and get off the road, I would get animals. And, you know, I don't want a farm. I want to put it all into conservancy. So I feel like, you know, if I got animals, I probably couldn't leave so much.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of putting that off. But yeah, it's just a nice way to balance life. Like I'm always on the road. So I'm in New York City, and then next week I'll be in the middle of nowhere in Iowa. So it's a good back and forth.
Nice juxtaposition there.
Yeah.
Right? Now I understand that you're around the time that you're about to move out to Iowa, you're sort of struck with the songwriting bug for your last album, My Wild West. Is that true?
Well, it was all sort of like informing itself. It was sort of subconscious. Like I was writing these songs for My Wild West kind of before I'd made the decision to move. But then when I went back and I listened to some of the songs, like even Wild West, you know, sort of about stepping out on your own and making this big kind of change and taking a chance, like it was almost like the songs I'd written were kind of subconsciously preparing my mind to make this decision of like, I'm going to make a big life change and I'm going to move like back to the Midwest. So it all kind of happened at the same time, and I was able to make that decision and then finish up the record in LA, and then upon completion, you know, pack up my house and move.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely pouring out of me, you know. I feel like My Wild West really was a record that it wasn't about like being sad that some guy didn't like me, you know, which is what Castles basically is about. But it's like My Wild West really was like about like, what do I need to do to like grow as an individual? Like what's next for me? So that's very much like My Wild West isn't really about romance. That was about the move. But then here we are now with Castles.
Right. You know, it's funny. You put out My Wild West independently, it's kind of on your terms, it's your music, you're doing it your way, and then it winds up being your most successful, really, record to date, you could say. Why do you think, I feel like that's a story you hear time and time again with artists where, you know, they play by somebody else's rules for a matter of time, and then they finally embrace their authentic self, they do it their way, and then it becomes their biggest success. Why do you think it takes artists so many years or so much time to get to that point?
You know, I don't know, and it's hard for me to see myself in those terms, like if it was one of my biggest successes, but I do think that people can tell when you're keeping it real. You know, I think like as my fan base could, I'm so fortunate that I have like a great fan base. Like when I play these concerts and I'm like, remember 2010? And they were like, yes, we were all there then and we're still with you, you know, when I put out my first album. So I feel like when I decided to make this life change, they were all like, do your thing, girl, you know? And I feel as though, you know, people can tell when you're faking it, at least in the kind of music I make, that if you're unhappy and you don't believe in what you're doing, and if you're just trying to like listen to what everyone else thinks, that people are going to see through that. So maybe there's just something to like when you really believe in what you're doing and you're enjoying it, there's an energy that is created. And it's sort of that, you know, art of not giving a bleep. I don't know if I should keep it clean. But I think, too, when you kind of, it's just reverse psychology. It's like when you kind of, especially on the last record, I think I've gotten kind of neurotic again with this record. But on the last one, I really didn't care. I was just like, I'm just going to do my thing. And I've resigned myself to the fact that maybe no one will be interested in it. And then people were. And I was like, great, bonus. Like, you know, and I think people can pick up on the energy of like, you know, you're doing it because you want to and because it brings you joy and because you're just trying to like live your truth or whatever.
Definitely. So you finally go out to Iowa, and that's predominantly where you wrote Castles, I understand, right?
Yes. It's a little hodgepodge, but
So what I think is so interesting is that you're writing Castles predominantly, I think, on guitar, it sounds like, and then your buddy from New York comes with somewhat of a digital setup, and then you find that, you know, writing to like a synthesized beat or chord progression is actually more natural for you than a guitar.
yeah, well, or more fun, just a change, you know, because I have always written a lot on acoustic guitar, and I write with other people a lot, which, you know, that mixes it up. But sometimes I think I just sit at the guitar and I just play A minor, and that's like my favorite chord. And it's like I keep writing the same song when I sit down on the guitar by myself. So I kind of had like nuggets of ideas for songs, like in, you know, late 2015, early 2016. But a friend of mine from New York did come out to my farm and had his laptop and was sort of like, you know, doing synth or playing the piano or giving me a beat, and I was singing along to that, and kind of got me like excited about this idea of like working in a way where, you know, I didn't have to feel like I had to get out the acoustic guitar, and it sort of helped me maybe make different melody choices than I normally would. And it just sort of like was an exercise in like a new way of like tapping into some melodic sensibility. So some of that, you know, started in Iowa, and then producer AG came out from LA to Iowa. We wrote a few songs and were able to record the meat of the song kind of in Iowa. But I also went to London, and I spent 2 weeks there with this guy, Liam Howe, who really kind of mixed and pulled a lot of the record together. But he incorporated a lot of, you know, ambient sort of synthetic elements, but even like analog synths, you know, into this new record, so that it does have a little bit more of a potentially programmed or synthesized sound, but it's also still super sparse. So it was really freeing to make a record kind of that's a little different, because it opened up new melodic possibilities for me.
Why didn't you take that approach sooner? Did you have an aversion to sort of the electronic approach or the digital approach?
I think that for a long time, and I still sort of feel this way, that, you know, since I've spent so much of my life like learning to sing since I was young and taking voice lessons and honing my craft, and, you know, played with a guitar player who was just like a virtuoso, there was a little bit of like stubbornness of like, you know, it's kind of cheating to just get on stage with like a computer and press play. Like, you know, anybody can do that. So we were always like, no laptops on stage, which now I'm actually playing with some tracks for the first time ever. So I think it just took me a while to come around, because, you know, in this day and age, it's so easy to just get out a computer and make some sounds. And I think I was a little bit like of a purist, and I thought, well, that's inorganic. But it's also easier too, when it makes it easier to like to make a record, because you can just like email someone your vocal and chill at your house instead of having to fly to London. Yeah, so yeah, I think I did have an aversion, but I think as I get older, I'm just like, whatever. I'm gonna try new things and see what I like and what I don't like.
Yeah. Do you find that sort of why not approach that you took to the record sort of spilt over into your personal life? Are you more open to trying things you may have not in the past? Are you more open to new experiences?
I think it's always going in cycles and waves. Like the song Best Days, I think is just a good example of like, sometimes you're in a place in your life where you don't really know, maybe you're in a funk and you don't really know exactly what the future holds. And then like something happens. Tomorrow you meet somebody who changes your life forever, and all of a sudden you're on this new adventure that you couldn't have planned for. And you have just like these ups and downs all throughout your life. So currently, I don't really know what my personal life is currently. I think I am a person who takes chances, and then at the very same time, I'm somebody who's just like, no, I'm good. I'm cool. Like, I don't need to meet any new people or do anything new or go anywhere new. Like, I've been enough places. I just want to go home, and then I'll go home and be like, I'm bored now. I want to go meet a bunch of new people again. So it's always changing. Lots of ups and downs.
Well, it's funny. You're talking about sort of, being social and antisocial and sort of that juxtaposition. A lot of people that have heard the record are saying it's really a story of that, of, light and darkness. And would you attest to that?
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes when I talk about my music, I should probably, like, in this opportunity to really talk to you frankly or earnestly. Like, I try to keep it light. But, for me as an artist and as somebody who's telling a story, I went through a lot in making this album. I, had to say goodbye to somebody like I really loved. And I think having moved to the farm, it was like, oh, is she going to make like a porch picking on the guitar kind of song, But it really, for me, was an opportunity to like process a loss and like a disappointment. So I feel as though, there is a lot of heaviness and darkness, but there's also like a ton of hope. So I think that that's the juxtaposition of, even with the album cover, it's like, it's underwater, but it also looks like it could be like in the stars. And there's this sort of, depth to it of like, you have to go into your darkness to find your light sometimes. And I think that's sort of what this album was for me, of being able to go and sit with those uncomfortable feelings, have the self-awareness to recognize my part in this relationship and what I did wrong, and hopefully then take all of that kind of in the muck and then like come out of the darkness and have all of this new like self-awareness and hope for tomorrow, and be kind of poised with this new set of information.
Yeah.
You don't grow without pain. That's just life. So
Definitely.
Yeah.
Some of those themes actually remind me of Twin Peaks, and I know that you were a part of the new Twin Peaks. Is that right?
Yeah,
How did that come about?
I don't know, back in 2010, David Lynch just started tweeting about me and talking about me in interviews. He had seen some online videos that my band and I had done. And so that was a thrill. Like, we were getting called, like, David Lynch keeps talking about you. And we ultimately ended up like talking on the phone, and he came to my show, and he's really into TM. So after like I had been in Iowa to take this TM course, like, had reached out and ended up joining him at his home and drinking coffee and catching up on life. And so we've just kind of stayed in touch over the years, and he's just been very supportive and kind to me. So I think it was 2015, I got like, an email that, hey, would you want to be on the new Twin Peaks? So of course, like, yes, that's amazing. Like, that's legendary status. So yeah, he wanted me to be a part of it, and I performed, and I think it was like episode 13 of The Return of Twin Peaks.
That's rad.
Yeah.
There's so many great songs on this. Of course, we know Best Days. That's the one that we've seen the video for, and it's out and is somewhat of the single. What's the song on here though that you would say you're most proud of, or out of everything, all the material that you made for Castles, you're like, I'm so happy I got that one right?
Oh, I mean, it's so hard when people ask you to choose, because, yeah, you love them all, and they're all important part of the puzzle. But I really love Blood and Muscle a lot. because it's just, for one, it's really like a track that's simple. It's very spare. I mean, it's basically just a piano and my voice. And there's a ton of emotion, and also like the vocal range of that song is very, very wide. I can sing very high and very low. So I'm really proud of that one. I like the concept of, in life, love, wanting to find something just real, just like getting your hands kind of dirty, down in the mud kind of love. So I like Blood and Muscle. I don't know. What's your favorite one?
I like Sand. Sand's my favorite.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I love Sand, too.
Yeah. And it sneaks up on you because
Thank
it's the
you.
second to last track. So you're kind of like, okay, I get this album. I know this album. And then like the second to last track really stole my heart.
Yes, and I'm glad because there you kind of like you're weaving your way through the record, and then by the time you get to Sand, it sort of starts to lighten up a little bit for that moment of like one of the lines in Sand is like, wonder if someday I'm gonna laugh about it, sort of, because someday anything that you go through, it's like, oh, someday you'll probably be able to look at that and be like, oh yeah, that was dumb.
Yeah.
So.
We're going to turn it over to the audience with one final question.
Okay.
This is, of course, so much of a journey as it is a project, as I opened our chat by saying. Would you say you're sort of past this point in your life? Are you still dealing with the things that you're writing about on this record?
I would say finishing it and having it come out was like a pretty good, like almost like a purge. Like, okay, I can release this now. I mean, the end of the thing is I'm ready to let go. So I would say I'm still sort of in it, but I'm like sitting with its lessons and it's sort of working its way out of me. And what I love so much about performing and sharing my music is that once I kind of can let go of something, it's wonderful to see how other people interpret the songs for their own uses in their own lives and how it applies to them, and sort of almost becomes theirs.
Oh, absolutely.
Like it's not even really mine anymore. It's everybody's now.
The magic of music, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. All right, let's get to some of these questions. The first one's going to come from right back here.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. I was
you're welcome.
wondering why the second S in your name is stylized as a mirror image.
I always kind of wanted to do that, and I never had in the past. I used to like doodle my name and would turn it in to make it look like a heart. And I felt like this time, because, even the album cover, I feel like talking about, light and dark and like above and below, like I'm underwater or are you in the sky? It's sort of, there's a lot of reflective energy in this album and a lot of reflective imagery. So the idea of having my name sort of be a reflection of itself, I thought just made sense to the content of like, it being a very reflective album. And it just looks cool.
Great question. Let's get to our second one. It'll come from right here.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering what advice you would have for an artist who feels as if their story is unworthy of being told.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry if that's you and you're feeling that way. I just feel like, when people ask me, like, what advice would you give to aspiring musicians? And I feel it's also like the music industry's changed a lot. So if also you can't control that. Don't get discouraged with that. But I think it's like, you just have to believe in yourself. Because other people might not ever believe in you. Or hopefully they do, but it's like, it's not, you just have to feel like you're worthy. And I know that can be hard, because ultimately that's what matters. And I think the more, like earlier I was saying, the more you just believe in what you're doing and are doing it out of like a sole purpose and not because you're trying to like compare yourself to anyone or compete with anyone or, really want to be famous or whatever, just that's false. So I think if you're doing what you're doing because you believe in it and you believe in yourself and you have a passion, that, you just have to hope that everything sort of will come together and people will pick up on that energy and be attracted to it. Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, time for one final question.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering, was there like any other artists that, like maybe you're listening to currently, maybe someone that you want to work with?
Oh, gosh. I've actually been listening to like a lot of jazz lately. There's this Norwegian group called Yaga Yazis that I really am into, which is actually like instrumental music. It doesn't have any singing in it. So I guess that's not the best example. I would like to collaborate with them. But there's Jeff Lynne from ELO, Jeff, and he's producer. I would love to work with Jeff Lynne. He put out an album called Jeff Lynne's ELO a couple years ago that I still is just kind of one of the best things I've heard in a few years. I would love to work with him.
Did you ever hear the story of him and Tom Petty? Apparently, Tom Petty wrote "Free Fallin'" like to make him laugh or something like that.
No, I didn't.
Oh
hear
yeah,
that.
it's a great story. Where like Tom Petty wrote what is arguably his biggest pop hit as just a gag for Jeff Lynne. I
That's
don't know.
amazing.
You got to look it up. But.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with Jeff Lynne, just his sound, you know, that Tom Petty, like so much of his sound really was through Jeff Lynne, and but I haven't heard that story, so I'm gonna Google it.
I forget what a bet maybe. I don't know, but I don't want to get the details wrong.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for stopping by, Lissie. Again, the record Castles is out and available everywhere, and tickets, not many, but some, are still available for the remaining tour dates. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Yes, you're so welcome. Pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.